I'm Carl, 25 years old, and after a crazy week of work, I decided I needed a break. I had been working long hours, barely having any time for myself, and honestly, I was exhausted. So when Saturday night came, I thought, why not go out and relax a little? I didn't have any big plans, nothing too wild, just a night out at a nightclub to have a drink, unwind, maybe catch some good vibes, and see what happens. There's a place downtown I've been to a few times. It's not one of those loud, chaotic clubs, but rather a more laid-back spot. People go there to enjoy the music, dance, and just have a good time. I figured that's exactly what I needed. I walked in around 1 a.m. The place was lively but not overcrowded, with a pleasant, mellow atmosphere, dim lights, music at a reasonable volume, not too overpowering but enough to feel the energy in the air. I headed to the bar, ordered a drink, and found a seat. I just let myself soak in the ambience, allowing the stress of the week to melt away. I don't go out often. To be honest, I'm not really a nightclub person. I prefer quiet nights with friends or even just staying home. But tonight, I just wanted to escape for a bit, and, I won't lie, the thought of seeing some beautiful women dancing well was part of the appeal. The crowd was a mix of people, chatting, laughing, some groups dancing near the floor. Everything felt pretty relaxed. I sipped my drink, looked around, and just tried to unwind. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I had no plans to meet anyone or make some big connection. It was just me and the night. Then, the lights dimmed, and the DJ's voice echoed through the speakers, announcing the start of a performance. At first, I didn't think much of it, just a regular club show, probably some dancers performing. But then, one of the dancers stepped onto the stage, and I froze. I know it sounds ridiculous, but for a moment, I didn't even recognize her. She had her back turned to me, and all I could see was the silhouette and the curves of her body, until she turned around, and I saw her face. My heart skipped a beat. Right in front of me was Lilia, my best friend's mother. I had to blink a few times to make sure I wasn't imagining things. It didn't make sense. Lilia was a highly respected woman, the type who always seemed to have everything together. I knew her as kind and elegant. The idea of her being here, on stage, dancing, didn't match the image I had of her at all. I quickly looked around, not wanting to seem like I was staring. I tried to keep my cool. I mean, I didn't want anyone to notice, especially her. I told myself it was fine, just a performance, nothing major. But inside, I was completely shocked, totally caught off guard. The last thing I expected when I went out tonight was to see Lilia performing in a nightclub. She was in her mid-40s, but she looked incredible, still as beautiful as I remembered, maybe even more so now. She had a certain grace about her, something undeniably captivating, even on that stage. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that this was just something she did for fun or as a hobby. But I couldn't stop my mind from racing. What was she doing here? Why didn't I know about this? I knew Lilia had been through a lot. She raised her son alone after her husband left her when the boy was still a child. But this was new to me. I didn't want to draw attention to myself. I didn't want to make her, or myself, feel awkward. So, I did what anyone in that situation would do. I looked away, pretending to watch something else. But even as I tried to focus on the crowd, I couldn't help but steal glances back at her. This was real. She was really there. The performance lasted a few more minutes, but it felt like time had slowed down. I couldn't wrap my head around the strangeness of it all. Finally, the music ended, and the lights came back on. I lowered my head, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I didn't want anyone to notice, but I couldn't shake the image of Lilia dancing on that stage. Something about it just felt off. Even though I couldn't explain why. The night was still young, but I was already feeling uneasy. I wasn't sure what to do with this situation. Lilia, my best friend's mom, on stage in front of everyone. I kept replaying the moment in my head, trying to make sense of it. But the more I thought about it, the stranger it felt. After a few more drinks, I figured maybe I should just head home. I hadn't come here to get stuck in my own head over something I couldn't explain. I had just turned my attention back to the bar when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around quickly, and to my absolute shock, there she was. Lilia stood in front of me, looking as calm and beautiful as ever. Her presence was warm, but there was something different about her, something in her eyes. A hint of worry, or maybe concern. I couldn't tell. "Carl," she said softly. Her voice was steady, but I could hear a trace of unease. "Can we talk for a minute?" My stomach dropped. I froze. I mean, what was I supposed to say? I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my mind was spinning. I wasn't sure if I felt embarrassed, surprised, or... I don't know. Maybe even a little confused. But I didn't want to make a scene, so I nodded. "Sure, Lilia. What's going on?" We stepped away from the bar, finding a quieter corner of the club. The music was still playing in the background, but here, it felt a little less intense. She took a deep breath before speaking, clearly trying to gather her thoughts. "Look. I know this probably seems strange to you," she started, glancing down at the floor. "I never expected to run into you like this. I've been doing this for a while, but I've kept it private. It's just something I do for myself. You know, it helps me unwind. Feel alive again." I was still processing her words, but I nodded, not wanting to make her uncomfortable. She was opening up to me, and I could tell this wasn't easy for her. "I understand," I said, keeping my voice calm, even though my mind was still racing. "I mean, it's your life, Lilia. I wasn't expecting this, but if it makes you happy, that's what matters." She gave me a small, grateful smile, but I could tell something was still weighing on her. "I just don't want anyone to find out about this," she said quietly, glancing around as if making sure no one else could hear. "I've kept it a secret for a reason. It's not anyone else's business. I don't want my son, or anyone else, to know. I've kept this to myself for years. It's just mine." The fact that she was confiding in me like this made me realize how serious this was for her. This wasn't some careless mistake or impulsive decision. Lilia had clearly thought about this a lot. I could see the emotion in her eyes. This wasn't easy for her. "I won't tell anyone," I reassured her. "You don't have to worry about that. I mean, I get it. You have the right to your privacy." She nodded, appreciating my words, though I could tell she was still carrying a heavy burden. "Thank you, Carl. You're one of the few people I can trust." I was surprised by her words, but I couldn't deny the sincerity in her voice. Finally, I opened the piece of paper and read the number written on it. The feeling was strange, almost too strange to be real. Lilia's number was just a simple piece of paper, yet it felt like the weight of the world was written on it. I didn't even know what I was going to say, but I thought that if I didn't call now, I might never get the chance. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number. The phone rang, and I immediately felt nauseous. It wasn't like calling a stranger, it was like calling someone I had known for a long time, someone who had been a part of my life in ways I hadn't fully realized until now. But things were different. This wasn't just an ordinary conversation, there were emotions tangled up in it. After a few rings, Lilia answered. Her voice was calm, but I could tell she was surprised. "Carl?" she asked, uncertainty in her tone. I hesitated for a moment before responding. "Yeah, it's me." I tried to sound normal, but my voice still wavered slightly. "I got your note. I just wanted to check in." There was a brief silence on the other end, and then she let out a soft sigh. "I'm glad you called," she said. "I wasn't sure if you would. I didn't want to pressure you into anything, but I really am glad you called." "Of course," I replied. I wasn't sure what to think after everything." There was another pause before she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I understand. I'm sure it was a shock. I never wanted you to see me like that, Carl. But the truth is, I needed someone to talk to. I've been alone for so long, and it's hard carrying everything by myself. Her words hit me like a wave. I hadn't expected her to open up like this, but somehow, it made sense. I had known her for years, but I had never really known her like this, so vulnerable, so raw. I understand, I said, feeling an unexpected sense of empathy. That must have been really hard. I don't know if you ever realized, she continued, but for years, I was just Lilia, Jake's mom. That's how everyone saw me. But there's more to me than that. And it's been difficult, Carl. My husband left when Jake was just 2 months old, and since then, I've had to do everything on my own. Raising him, taking care of everything. It's taken a toll. But dancing is the one thing that's kept me sane. I could hear the emotion in her voice, the way she struggled to keep herself together. It was clear she had been through a lot, and the weight of those years was catching up to her. I had no idea, I admitted. I'm sorry. It sounds like you've been through hell. Lilia let out a shaky sigh. It hasn't been easy, Carl. But dancing gave me a purpose. It gave me something to hold on to when everything else felt like it was falling apart. It's my escape, my way of taking control of my life. I felt a growing admiration for her. She had been through so much, yet she had managed to hold herself together in a way most people couldn't. I could understand why she had chosen this path, and although I had been shocked to see her at the club, I now saw it in a different light. You're incredibly strong, I said, feeling a newfound respect for her. I'm glad you have something that makes you happy. There was a long silence before she spoke again. Thank you, Carl. That means more to me than you know. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about the kiss or the strange situation at the club. This was about two people connecting on a deeper level, understanding each other's pain, struggles, and needs. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I truly understood Lilia. The days after my phone call with Lilia felt like they moved in slow motion. We talked every few days at first, casual conversations about the weather, small talk, nothing too heavy. But beneath those simple exchanges, I could feel something shifting. There was a bond forming between us, something hard to define but impossible to ignore. And no matter how much I tried to keep things light, there was always an unspoken tension in our conversations, like we were both dancing around something we weren't ready to acknowledge yet. We agreed to meet for coffee one afternoon. It wasn't a date, at least, that's what I kept telling myself. It was just two people talking. Two people who understood each other in a way no one else did. Lilia had been through so much, and I was starting to realize that I no longer saw her as just my best friend's mom. She was a woman, with her own complexities, struggles, and needs. I arrived at the small cafe first, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. I checked my watch as I waited, trying to focus on the book in front of me, but my mind kept drifting back to her. What would it be like to sit across from her and talk face to face after everything that had happened? Would things feel different? When Lilia walked in, my heart skipped a beat. She looked just as beautiful as ever. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and she wore a simple, but elegant dress that made her look much younger than she was. She had always been attractive, but sitting across from her in this context, she seemed different, more vulnerable in a way that made her even more captivating. Hey, Carl, she said with a warm smile, taking a seat across from me. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. No, not at all, I replied, trying to sound casual, though my voice was a little shakier than I intended. I'm just glad we could meet. We exchanged small, slightly awkward smiles, and then she spoke again, her voice softer this time. I've been thinking a lot, about everything. About that night. About what we talked about on the phone. I'm glad you called. I don't want you to think I was just acting on impulse or doing something reckless. I nodded, understanding what she meant. To be honest, there's a lot to process. But I'm glad you felt like you could talk to me. I know that's not easy. And I don't want you to feel uncomfortable about any of this. Lilia looked down at her coffee cup, tracing the rim with her fingers. I've never really talked to anyone about this, she admitted. About how hard it's been. Raising Jake alone. The work, the pressure. I don't regret any of it, but sometimes I wonder if I've missed out on something. Maybe even the chance for something more. I swallowed hard, trying not to let her words affect me too much. But I felt the weight of them. Lilia, I said, my voice quieter now. I think you've done an amazing job. Seriously. Raising Jake, handling everything, it's more than most people could manage. She gave me a soft smile, her eyes meeting mine. Thank you, Carl. That means a lot. The conversation continued, flowing naturally as we talked about life, the past, the things we had missed, the things we hoped for. It was easier than I expected. We found ourselves laughing more than we had in a long time, both of us letting our guards down little by little. At some point, I realized how much I enjoyed her company. But there was still a lingering fear in the back of my mind. What if this became something more? I couldn't deny that we had a connection. But there was an age gap to consider, not to mention the fact that she was Jake's mom. It felt like we were walking a very thin line, trying to keep our balance without falling. And as I looked at her, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt truly conflicted. I admired her. Respected her. And, if I was being honest, I was starting to care for her in a way I hadn't expected. But what did that mean? Could anything really happen between us? We shared a few late-night calls, exchanged messages, and slowly revealed more about ourselves to each other. To be honest, at first, I felt like we were just friends, two people with an unexpected connection. But the more we talked, the more that connection grew until one night, it became impossible to ignore. I remember that evening as if it were yesterday. It was nearly midnight. I had been out with some friends, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Lilia. We had talked earlier that day, and our conversation lingered in my mind. She had been distant that night, as if she were holding something back. So, I decided to call her. Maybe it was the alcohol or just the weight of everything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I needed to talk to her. Hey, Carl. Her voice was a little tired but warm. What's going on? Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing, I said, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was pounding. I'm fine, she replied with a small laugh in her voice. Just thinking about us, about everything that's happened. Once again, the unspoken words hung in the air between us. We had both been avoiding saying it, but there was no going back now. Yeah, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. Me too. We were silent for a moment, neither of us knowing exactly how to continue. But then, it was as if the tension finally melted away. Carl, she said softly, I've been thinking about this a lot, about what we've done, and I don't know. I don't want to deny it anymore. At first, I said nothing. My breath caught in my chest. Was she really saying this? Were we really talking about this? I don't either, I finally admitted. I can't keep pretending like nothing happened. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I know the age gap is complicated, she said quietly. The fact that you're my son's friend. I understand all of that. But Carl, what we have isn't just a fleeting thing. It's real. My heart pounded faster at the sincerity in her voice. I agree, I said, my voice steady now. This was real, and I didn't want to pretend otherwise. But we have to be careful, right? She agreed. I don't want to hurt anyone, especially Jake. And I don't want attention on us. But I also don't want to keep pretending I don't feel what I feel. I understand. Neither of us wanted to cause trouble. We both knew how delicate the situation was, and how complicated things could become if someone found out. But that didn't change what was happening between us. This was more than just attraction, there was something deeper there, something we both recognized. And for the first time, we felt like we were on the same page. We'll keep this between us, I said, my voice gentle, but firm. We'll figure it out. We don't need anyone else's judgment. She let out a soft sigh on the other end of the line, and I could tell she was relieved. Thank you, Carl. I don't want anyone to know just yet. I just want us to have time to figure out what this means. I agree, I said. We'll take it slow, keep it private. We'll figure out if this is something real or just a fleeting moment. And with that, something changed between us. It was like the final barrier had fallen. We both knew where this could lead, but neither of us wanted to turn away from what we were feeling. We understood the risks, the complications, but none of it mattered. For once, we weren't afraid to be honest with each other. The next day, I saw her again, this time at her apartment. When I arrived, there was no pretending, no awkwardness, just the two of us finally acknowledging what was happening between us. Lilia opened the door with a small smile, her eyes searching mine for any hesitation. But all I could do was smile back, because I knew, in that moment, there was no turning back. We spent the evening talking, laughing, sharing stories. And as the night deepened, it became clear that we were both ready for the next step. We didn't know where this would lead, but we both knew one thing: we couldn't deny what was between us any longer. And so, with a single kiss, we surrendered to what we had both been avoiding. It was slow, gentle, but it was everything we had been holding back. This was the beginning of something new, something real, something no one could take from us. But we also knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, difficult conversations, and maybe even heartbreak. But for now, all we had was this moment, this shared understanding. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly as it should. As I held her close, I whispered, one step at a time. She smiled and kissed me again. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together. It has been over 6 months since that night when Lilia and I first let go of our reservations. Since then, our relationship has deepened in ways I never imagined. What started as something tentative, wrapped in uncertainty and secrecy, has grown into something solid, something real. And through it all, we've learned an undeniable truth: we love each other. When I think back to how we started, two people almost too afraid to admit what was happening, I can't help but smile. Every step, every moment of uncertainty, led us here, to a place where we no longer have to hide. We can finally be ourselves, without fear of judgment or complication. The weeks and months following our decision to be together weren't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the weight of our circumstances threatened to pull us apart. But those moments were always fleeting. And every time they came, we found our way back to each other. Lilia has become more than just a lover, she is my true partner. She is the person I turn to for advice, for comfort, for everything. Her strength, kindness, and wisdom have become a constant in my life. And despite our age difference and our pasts, we feel like we were meant to be together. We've grown closer than I ever thought possible. Our conversations, once hesitant and filled with questions, now flow easily, full of laughter and love. We found a rhythm, a way of being together that works for both of us. And with each passing day, I see more clearly that I am exactly where I'm meant to be. One afternoon, as we sat together at a cafe, Lilia brought up an idea that had been lingering in my mind for weeks. "Carl," she said, her eyes shining with excitement, "how would you feel about getting away for a bit? Just the two of us, somewhere warm, where we can relax and really enjoy ourselves with no distractions?" I looked at her, the idea blooming in my mind. The thought of escaping everything, even just for a little while, was exactly what we needed. "I think that's a great idea," I said, a smile spreading across my face. "A warm place. Somewhere just for us." After a few days of planning, we booked a trip to a small island in the Caribbean. The thought of spending days by the beach, soaking in the sun, just being together, it made my heart race with excitement. The day of our trip arrived faster than expected. We packed our bags, left our responsibilities behind, and boarded a flight to paradise. The anticipation filled the air, and when we landed, it felt like a dream. The warm breeze, the clear skies, everything was perfect. We spent our days exploring the island, walking hand in hand along the shore, feeling the warmth of the sun on our skin. And the nights were even better, dining under the stars, sipping wine, talking about everything and nothing at all. For the first time, time seemed to slow down, giving us space to simply be. And as I held her close under the starlit sky, I whispered, "This is just the beginning, Lilia." She smiled, her eyes filled with love and promise. "I can't wait to see where this takes us," she said. "Me neither," I whispered back. And with that, we fell asleep, knowing that whatever came next, we would face it together.